What's up, guys? So, lately there have been quite a few people making videos about their opinions on Pokemon Sword and Shield, and in a handful of videos that I have seen, they have been mostly negative towards these games, which is totally understandable, because I can see a handful of reasons why these games can be disliked, but despite those reasons, I don't think that these games deserve anywhere near as much hate as they get. Now, I guess that is just because I'm sort of a Sword and Shield apologist, because though there are massive flaws with Sword and Shield, as I said, I don't think they deserve to be hated nearly as much because there are a few aspects of these games that deserve to be commended. So let's get straight to it, but before I do, let me just say by no means am I saying these games are anywhere near the best in the franchise, but they are not by any means the worst game in the franchise to me. And also, this is just my opinion, so feel free to disagree at any point whatsoever. There are obviously a handful of complaints that are held by a majority of the people who have both played this game and also have held these complaints since way back when these details came out. And one of the first complaints that always comes to mind when it comes to Sword and Shield are the rivals. And the first of which that I want to talk about is possibly the biggest and most overly hated rival by far, which is definitely going to be Hop. Now, I think Hop is probably one of the most controversial characters I have ever seen in the Pokemon franchise, and I think it's quite unfortunate that not a lot of people like Hop, and sadly, I think it's more the fault of the game design than Hop himself as a character, because, for example, in my very first playthrough, I never really understood the hate for Hop whatsoever. I mean, I think he is a great character, and his character arc throughout the game is one of the best in the franchise, and if you happen to want specifics, check out this video right here where I go into detail about why I like Hop so much, but for now, I'm going to continue on. Now, in my second playthrough, after already experiencing the whole story of the game, I finally understood why people couldn't stand Hop, because the amount of times that this man stops you in your tracks to give you some needless exposition is absolutely insane, and honestly way worse than How at some points. And if you are playing this game just to play the game and don't care for the story, I totally understand why you would dislike him. Though I personally don't think you should hold it against Hop, I get it. Now, though Hop is definitely the most hated, I've also seen some complaints about the other two rivals as well. Not so much Bede, but more Marnie. And though I'm not the biggest fan of Bede, I think that's precisely the point of his character. He isn't supposed to be likable. And because of that, I don't really think there's much to dislike about his character other than him being a dick, because even his development throughout the story is pretty admirable. And with Marnie, I've heard a few people call her passionless and even question why she's one of the supporting characters to begin with, and the way I see it is she's going through the gym challenge for her city and her brother, not so much herself. So yes, her motivation isn't going to be the greatest, but for a character to do that and be passionless, to me, I think that's pretty contradictory. Because if you don't want to do something, but you care so much for your family and your town that you do it anyways, there has to be at least a little bit of passion behind that, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to give 110% like Marnie does. And again, I also go in more detail about Marnie in this video here. So moving on, I'm sure that we all know what's next on the list of complaints for these two games, and that's the difficulty, or really the lack thereof. Now personally, I didn't play these games for a challenge, because this game was the first time in roughly 5 years that I picked up a Pokemon game since Black and White 2. So I genuinely just wanted to experience a Pokemon game one more time, since I missed out on the whole 3DS era completely. So I don't really want to say much about it, especially since the criticism of the difficulty has been said several times in several different ways, and I don't want to beat a beyond dead horse. So next is the Dex Cut. Now, originally, I will be honest, I completely hated the thought of it. And to this day, I still don't get why they couldn't have just put all of the leftover Pokemon in the game after you beat the game, like they have for years in the previous ones. But in the end, I do think that it was a little bit of a bittersweet thing, because it forced me to use some Pokemon that I never really gave a chance, and it also made me focus on more of the Gen 8 Pokemon. And though a lot of Pokemon that I have been using for years returned with the DLC, I still found myself using different Pokemon than the ones I grew up using in every single game. And though it may be naive, I do think that it was probably for the best, because some of the Gen 8 Pokemon have grown to become some of my favorite Pokemon ever, and I know I'm definitely not alone in that. Finally, let's talk about the big one, which is the story. Now, there are two storylines for this game, one being the Gym Challenge plot, and the other one being the Darkest Day story, and I genuinely enjoyed the Gym Challenge side of the story. I really liked all of the gym leaders feeling like real people instead of just egotistical weirdos who shut themselves inside of a building for all of eternity, and having several rivals who all interacted with one another was really enjoyable and made it feel like the world didn't revolve around the player character and the player character alone. I really wish that they would have expanded on it more as a whole, but though I do feel like it was missed potential, the potential that is missed pales in comparison to the Darkest Day plot. Like, honestly, anytime that we got teased with some lore about the Darkest Day, it drove me crazy with the amount of time that they spent telling us not to worry about it, just for us to end up to have to deal with it in the end, and with all of that basically coming out of nowhere really pissed me off. And part of what makes me so upset about this is it's literally the only game where we are completely removed from the whole reveal, setup, and given practically no lore on the event, and then we just show up, catch Eternatus, and boom, it's over. Like, what? It was so beyond disappointing, because to me, that's like in the Gen 1 games, us being told not to worry about Team Rocket over and over again by Oak and Blue, just for us to turn around and walk into Silphco for no reason whatsoever and whack the shit out of Giovanni. Or in Platinum, Cynthia and Looker tell us to not worry about Team Galactic over and over and over again, and somehow we find our way into the Distortion world, we fight Cyrus at the end, and move on with our lives. It absolutely makes zero sense. And I don't understand what the point of having the Darkest Day plot was whatsoever. Like, genuinely, I feel like if the Darkest Day plot wasn't a thing, and one made Chairman Rose an actual villain instead of a dumbass with a god complex, and turned around and made Evil Rose just blackmail Leon by threatening to have his employees beat the shit out of the player and Hop so they can no longer continue with their challenge, and the only way that they won't do that is if Leon helps Rose take over all of Galar. And then for us to have to turn around and gather up a handful of gym leaders to help us take down Rose and his company, as well as some gym leaders also being on his side, and even Marnie and Pierce as well because they need the money. I feel like that would personally be such a better plot, and it would be somewhat of an ode to the Gen 1 games, with Giovanni being 1, a gym leader, and 2, being an evil mastermind. And like I said, I don't think this game is the worst one whatsoever, but it definitely is not the best by any means, especially since most of the flaws are all just stupid decisions that were allowed to be made. Now honestly, I'm not sure how accurate this statement will be, but I'm sure that in a few years these games will end up being remembered somewhat fondly, just like with X and Y and Sun and Moon, and I'm sure it's not impossible because we all know that everyone hated both of those gens when they first came out. And if people can grow to love Sun and Moon, I'm sure it'll be just as easy for Sword and Shield, because personally I think some of these things that they tried to do in this game were really good ideas, because trying to make the game more character driven, making the champion and gym leaders feel like actual people, as well as having the professor be relatively involved in the story, are all wonderful ideas. And I do think that Dynamax and Gmax are good mechanics, because I definitely do love the designs for some of the Gmax Pokemon, but the flaws of this game definitely take away from the good parts of it, for sure. I just really hope that Game Freak learns from these mistakes, and given that Legends Arceus is nothing like a run-of-the-mill mainline game whatsoever, and are rumored to have actual difficulty settings along with a bunch of other things, I think Game Freak finally has learned, and of course by the time this video comes out we will definitely see whether that statement is true or not. And judging how literally every single PokeTuber besides one is saying that this is one of the greatest games in the franchise, I think it's safe to say that they have. But with that being said, let me know your thoughts on Sword and Shield, and do you think that maybe I'm being way too easy on these games, or do you agree with some of my points? I definitely would love to see what your take is on Sword and Shield, and thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and hopefully I'll catch you in the next one.